This is my February reading wrap up as well as my March reading hopefuls. I was only able to read 4.5 books this month, and I'm counting the half because I will be finishing the second half in March. I didn't read quite as much as I was hoping this month, but that's because I was trying to read Dune. And I was humbled, I feel like, by Dune. I was just humbled a little bit. I'll give a little mini spoiler-free review of every book that I read, and I'll also be explaining why I'm excited to read the books that I have in my March TBR. I will have the timestamp chapter things on the bottom of the video, so if you want to skip my opinion on any book or anything you don't care about, then just refer to that. February is the month of sequels for me because there is no book that I finished this month that was the first in a series. All of them are either second or third in their series, so I'm gonna be very careful with, giving my analysis and thoughts of things, so don't worry, I will not be spoiling anything ahead. Started off the month with The House of Flame and Shadow, which I've been waiting for like a year, since I finished, like Crescent City 2. I'm not gonna give any slight synopsis for A House of Flame and Shadow because it is the third in the Crescent City books. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. And that's because there were just so many aggravating parts about the book. A lot of like character actions were a little annoying, even though I do feel like they fit with the character. I just wish there were a little bit more consequences to certain actions. And then also I just feel like it was just crammed, like too much information tried to cram into one book and too much like action, which is very outside of like what Sarah J Maas typically does. I just feel like she has been smarter than this in the past, so it's a little sad. I don't know what happened there. There are lots of theories about why this one is having a lot worse of a reception than a lot of her other books. I don't think I've given any of her books 3 out of 5 stars except for the first Throne of Glass book, I think. And she wrote Throne of Glass when she was like 16 years old, so years have passed, and so it's just a little confusing. I mean, there are 3 stars for fully different reasons, but still. Anyways, the only thing keeping it at 3 stars is the world building that she put into House of Flame and Shadow that I was just eating up. And then there's one character that was literally just holding the book on their shoulders. I don't even want to I'm not going to let you know who it is or anything, but that character made the book a million times better. So that's why it's a 3 out of 5 stars. I do think that this was a very contentious book amongst Sarah J Maas, even like Sarah J Maas fans. And I'm counting my rereads under this wrap up because I did read the book, but since I wanted to be max hype for the new Crescent City book, then I decided to try to reread like all of Sarah J Maas stuff before the book came out, but I didn't time it very well. So even though I did reread the first 2 Crescent City books leading up to it, I also was trying to get through acotar and Throne of Glass. I failed very, very hard at the other ones. The only books I was able to get through my rereads of was the first Throne of Glass book and the first 3 acotar books, which that is much more impressive. For me, at least. I'm impressed with myself. But my reread of A Court of Wings and Ruin did happen in February, so that is one of the books I read. Once again, I'm not going to give a synopsis because it's the 3rd book in the series, and not trying to give any spoilies. And as much as I love Akamath is the best, I'll still give you guys my review because I don't think it really changed. I think I have it at 4.5 stars. But I will say there are things that happen at the end of the book that is the reason why I feel like it isn't 5 stars. A lot of times I feel like the ending of a story, even though this isn't the end of acotar, it's like the end of like a certain like story arc essentially. I liked it, but not loved it kind of thing. But all the contents within that point, I loved. I love a lot of it. And the 3rd book I read this month was Two Twisted Crowns. And let me tell you, Two Twisted Crowns is the 2nd book in the Shepherd King duology, and the 1st book is One Dark Window. And I love this duology so much. I read One Dark Window, I think in December, but then I was on vacation, so I didn't have time to immediately get into the 2nd book, or else I definitely would have, because I was so hyped at the end of that book. And the 2nd book holds up. Like the 2nd book might be, I don't know, I would say it might be slightly better, but there's just different elements that are, it's like, It has such a cool magic system. The whole series, I highly recommend people to get into it, mainly because I want more people to talk about it with, and 2, I want more people to make fan art. So if you're an artist, please read these series and make fan art for me specifically. One of these days I'll have expendable income and I will commission fan art, but until that day, I just have to hope other people will love it as much as I do. So this series is very like almost like dark romance fantasy kind of thing, and the magic system is based on like cards and like touching the cards, and there's only a certain amount of cards, and like it's just so cool. I love when people do something more interesting with like magic systems rather than just like typical like elements or like things like that. So I absolutely loved it. Also the characters and the romance. I don't even want to say too much, but the romance is so good, and it's not quite spicy like in terms of like, oh, it does get spicy, doesn't it? It's just not as heavy on the spice. It's not about the spice, which is my favorite thing. Like, I don't like necessarily books that revolve around the spice or that the spice makes up for like romance or like connection kind of thing. I love that this has, it's just, did I give 2 Twisted Crowns 5 stars? Yeah, I gave 2 Twisted Crowns 5 stars because it was just amazing. I loved it. People need to read the Shepherd King duology, please, 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 and then come report back to me. Even report to me while you're reading it. Anything, please. And the 4th book I read was Ruthless Vows, and I read Divine Rivals last year, and I was really excited for Ruthless Vows to come out, but once again, I was on vacation during like, you know, Christmas and into the new year. So I wasn't able to start reading it as soon as it came out, unfortunately. So I've been like literally on the edge of my seat wanting to read this book because Divine Rivals, it broke me. I cried so hard, but it was so good. It was so good. And Ruthless Vows, also amazing. I will say I still think I like Divine Rivals more, mainly because Divine Rivals like had just like a touch of magic. It was very magic realism is kind of what it felt like. So I really, really liked that aspect. I also tend to really like it when characters are more in like a flirty part of their relationship. And then once they get together, then sometimes I'm like, it's still very cute and I'm still very attached, but I just love a little bit of flirting, you know? And I feel like some of that goes away when they get together. Like there's less, I don't know, less unsurety, the little butterflies and things like that. But anyways, Ruthless Vows went a little bit more into like the magic and fantasy and all of that. And I feel like with how much of it was lacking in the first one, it felt a little disjointed in that way, but the like relationship and stuff that was still there, it was still amazing. And I was still like very invested and enjoyed the way it ended. But I did rate it a 4 out of 5 just because it wasn't, mainly because of the magic thing. It just felt a little disjointed, but still 100% worth reading both books. And lastly, the half book I read, which I'm counting because I'm going to be finishing next month, is Dune. I like the first movie, so the second movie's coming out in literally like a day or 2 for me, but for you it's I think already out. But I enjoyed the movie, so I was like, oh, let me read the book. And when people said it was dense, I was like, well, I thought in terms of like amount of pages, and I was like, I've read plenty of books this long before, but it means like dense of information and with like these like more detached kind of sci-fi series, I feel like it takes me a lot longer to start getting attached to the characters and everything. So I believe that I will like it by the end of the book, but it's just taking a bit to get there. It's not something I'm particularly very excited to read or like excited to start reading, like whenever I'm sitting down to read. But once I start reading, then I'm like, oh, this is interesting. But for some reason there's a disconnect there and I can't quite put my finger on it. And I feel like I was the same way with Red Rising, and I got like halfway through the Red Rising series and I'm going to finish. It's just more that it got really depressing, so I needed to take a break from it. But I also had the same struggle, whereas the first book in Red Rising, I was like very much not attached to the characters until like the very, very end. And a lot of it felt like why is this happening? Why, like, it was very, like, they would just barely explain things, or like they wouldn't explain things to the degree I wanted to, but that's because you weren't at that part yet. Like, it's a lot of setting up for things, which is understandable with how big of like a world Red Rising is, and I'm sure Dune is as well, and just like these sci-fi series that have like so much going on with different planets and all kinds of stuff. So I do plan on finishing it. It's just that literally yesterday the library took it back because I have it on audiobook and Kindle from the library. So my time ran out and I'm like 56% of the way through or something like that. So I put in a hold, and so I'll probably be getting it again in a couple of weeks, and then I will hunker down and finish that sucker. So yeah. But right now, in my mind, only halfway through. Dune is sitting at a 3 out of 5 stars, but I feel like that could easily change. It could change, it could change, it could change. Okay. Now we're gonna get into my March hopefuls. And first off is Faebound. I've seen nonstop good stuff about Faebound. And also the freaking cover is beautiful, and that gets me. I judge books by the cover pretty much all the time. And the cover of Faebound is gorgeous. I don't know what it's about, and I don't care because I'm gonna read it. And also I tend to like to go into books pretty blind a lot of the time, which I guess was gonna make this section of the video a little bit harder because I wanna explain why I want to read these books, but also a lot of it is just vibes. I often like to go in not knowing anything and just having no expectations, nothing, just blank slate. Because I feel like then I can get the most out of it, but maybe, I don't know. I guess I haven't tried to like read synopsises and stuff before going into things, but I will say I did technically read the synopsis for Faebound at one point, and then I've just wiped it from my memory. I don't remember at all anymore. So I read the synopsis because I am doing a little monthly book club where I do a live stream here on YouTube at the second Sunday of every month. And the working title for the book club right now is Page Pixies, because I like alliterations. And one of the main things with this book club is we are focusing on books written by POC and or women authors. So that's fun. And also we are pretty much staying within fantasy and sci-fi because that is what I tend to like reading. And then also because that's mainly what I talk about. A lot of my like friends and like people I talk to online also read that genre. So it's just easier to keep us all entertained with sci-fi and fantasy. We've actually already chosen the next book after Faebound. So if you want to go ahead and get a start on reading that, you can. And it's going to be The Space Between Worlds. I think it's the, or just A Space Between Worlds. Either way, that's the book we're going to read for next month. So you can go ahead and get on that. And that is also one of my March hopefuls because I would like to have the book read by the time I do the book club in April. So I haven't read Faebound yet because I'm pretty sure I'm going to like whiz through it. So I'm literally probably going to start it like in 2 days, and then I have a week to get through it, which I feel like I'm very capable of doing. So getting into Space Between Worlds, the reason why I wanted to read that is because the synopsis of it sounded really cool. Let me get my phone so I can let you know the synopsis, because this one I remember a little better, but not totally. Okay, so it is The Space Between Worlds. Oh my god, this is such a long synopsis. Okay, yeah. So basically there's like multiverses and there's parallel people, like you in parallel, you know, your parallel selves in different universes. And then there's some people who can like travel between them, but there's certain rules because, you know, interdimensional or inter-universal travel is always funky. There's something funky about the main characters, like other self or doppelganger or whatever. And then it, you know, plunges herself into like this whole experience thing. So it just sounded cool. I love multiversal, fun, interesting sci-fi things. And also I'm pretty sure it is LGBTQ, like main romance kind of thing. I think. I can look right now. I also just don't want to look too hard. I don't want to know too much. Next on my March hopefuls is Bride, because everyone has been talking about it, and I've never read an Ali Hazelwood book, but this seems like a good bridge to maybe start reading some Ali Hazelwood, because this one is more fantasy, I think. Most of her stuff, I'm pretty sure, is contemporary romance, and this is one of the first like fantasy type stuff she's doing, because it's like werewolf, vampire kind of thing. Also, because I've been seeing stuff online about Bride, I also learned what the Omegaverse is, which is crazy that I didn't know what it was after existing online for like the entirety of my life. I was on Tumblr pretty intensely. I don't know how I avoided it, but I did only just recently learn what Omegaverse is. So yeah, that's just information I have. Not that I like, honestly, not the weirdest thing I've seen on the internet. So totally reasonable. But now I know what nodding is. Even though I haven't started the book, I just heard that that is something you need to know going. So I was looking it up and then I learned all this sort of stuff and it's just crazy. If you don't know what the Omegaverse is, just go forward with caution and just know, like, if you're not usually comfortable with weird internet things, then you're probably not going to be comfortable with the knowledge of the Omegaverse. Just fair warning. Anyway, side note, Bride is apparently a almost like introductory kind of vibe from Omegaverse, or it was like written as Omegaverse fanfic and now it's a book. Either way, people are loving it. And I would like to see if I like it as well. Also in March, I am probably going to be starting the Bridgerton series. I'm doing a buddy read with one of my friends because we want to try to read up to Penelope's story when the Penelope season comes out. I think it comes out in May. So we have like some time, but I think it'll just be like a fun little refresh, like story in between like me reading other things. So this month I'm hoping to at least read The Duke and I, which is the first Bridgerton book. And I think I just got it from the library recently. So like my hold, is up and I have it. So yeah, so I'm probably gonna get started on that pretty soon. Also, A River Enchanted. And that is because Rebecca Ross wrote Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. And I was like, I really like this thing. So I'll probably like this other thing you write, which I do a lot of times. If I like an author a lot, then I'll go and I read their other stuff. So I want to read A River Enchanted, and then I think the next one is like An Endless Sea or something along those lines. I didn't look too hard at the second book. I don't want to try to accidentally get spoilers or anything. So I, once again, know nothing about the book going in. I have gotten like, I don't want to say like 10% into the book because I had gotten it from the library, but I was reading so many other things that I wasn't able to read it in time. So I've read just the very beginning and I'm already like intrigued with the world and like the whatever it's setting up. So I will hopefully be finishing that and maybe even finishing the second book in this month, depending on if I can get it from the library again, because I think there's a pretty decent wait on the book. So there's also 2 really short books that I have been trying to read. By trying to read, I mean, I keep getting them from the library and see that they're only like, a handful of hours comparatively to the other books that I'm reading. And I go, oh, I could easily do that in a day or 2 days or something. And then I just keep telling myself that over and over. I keep being like, oh, I'll do it in a couple days. I'll do it in a couple days because it'll be like this. And then it just keeps happening. So then my time will run out at the library and then I'll put it on hold again and then I get it again. And then it's just this vicious cycle. So I've had both of these books in my like library rotation for at least like 3 rotations, I think. So I really, really need to get to them this month. It will happen. And these 2 books are On Earth, We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And this book was actually recommended to me by a friend that I rock climb with and that I just hang out with in general. And she has decently good taste. So I will try this book out because it's pretty short. And also I have seen it on other people's like recommended lists. So I definitely want to give it a shot. Once again, I know nothing of what it's about, but I heard that it might ruin my life or make me cry, which I'm 100% here for. And the second short book that I will be reading in March is This Is How You Lose the Time War. And it's got the 2 little birds on the cover. I've heard just random little snippets about it. I've heard when it like first came out, which I assume it was when it first came out because I feel like I all of a sudden heard about it from like a bunch of people, maybe last year. I think it's a sci-fi thing, but I don't fully know because the front doesn't like read sci-fi, but also Time War sounds very sci-fi and I love weird time things. So every like little bit I've heard about it seems like something I like. It's just the cover that throws me. I don't know, the cover just looks not sci-fi. It just looks like almost like a gentle little like homey, comfy, romancy thing. I don't really know why. I just feel like usually sci-fi books have a certain like vibe to the cover and this is just not it, which is fine. I'm sure maybe I'll feel otherwise when I finish the book. I'll be like, oh my God, this is the perfect cover. But at the moment, it's throwing me. Either way, I'm here for it and I will be reading it. And I think that is a good place to stop my March hopefuls, even though I technically have more that I would like to get to if I could, but realistically, I don't think I can do more than 7 books. So I will cut it there, and I will report back, obviously, next month of what I read in March. So, yeah, I'll see you guys then, I hope. So if you would also like to see, then, you know, subscribe. And maybe I'll change the structure because this is the first time I'm doing one of these little like wrap-ups and hopeful things. And let me know in the comments if you are really excited for a certain book, or like what your hopefuls are for the next month. If you're excited about something I'm gonna read, give me a little hype me up on the book if you are really down for it. Or if you're like, this book is shit, you could tell me that too, I guess, but then I'll probably still be reading it because I don't know you like that yet. And with that, have a wonderful next month. I hope you read all the books that you would like to read. And I hope that the last month was full of good reading. Good reading for you. Good reading for you, good reading for me. All right? I bid you adieu.